Welcome to the first My First Cadaver exclusive installment, brought to you by Med School Tutors. I'm Faith Aaron. Medical school is a hell of an undertaking. From the sink or swim feeling of the first few years to the immensity of tackling the USMLE Step 1 and the baptism by fire of third year and beyond, it's no wonder med students, residents, and doctors are so heavily caffeinated. In our latest podcast episode, My First Big Mistake, we enjoyed some schadenfreude as doctors shared their missteps. In this installment, we'll take it one step further with some idiot-proofing tips for med students.
So, for med school, I wish somebody had prepared me for the fact that I would not be a superstar anymore. I think one of my favorite quotes is by G.B. Shaw, and he says, "In heaven, an angel is nobody in particular." And that kind of applies to medical school, because in medical school, a smart guy is nobody in particular. What happens, though, when you get into that mode, when you get to med school and you're not the only smart guy, you try to differentiate yourself and then rail against yourself, and you realize that you can't. It's not easy. It's not as easy anymore to be sort of a star. And I think I really wish somebody had done that, because then we put up these defenses and we act tough. And my way of doing this was by trying to be house, essentially. People don't believe me now because I've mellowed out quite a bit, but I used to be a complete douchebag in first year of medical school. And it was all an act. It was all an act to try and seem smarter, seem like I was just getting it, seems like I was, effortlessly, excellent at what I did. But then, I'm glad sense prevailed and I dropped the act. And the thing I would definitely say for medical school is take a deep breath and realize that if you don't get it the first time, there will be several other chances to figure it out, to get to know it. I think the way to think about it really is you have about 3 years to figure out how not to kill somebody and how to take care of really sick people. So it's okay if you don't know something the first time. You will get it. There's still gaping holes in my knowledge as a second-year resident that I'm still filling in. And I imagine that this will continue on even into the years that I'm attending. And that's just the nature of the medicine. I think Hippocrates said that the art is long, and he was right.
In general, for third year, you have to understand that in certain settings, there's just no hand-holding whatsoever. And you really have to be confident in yourself and be willing to ask. Am I allowed to touch this? Am I allowed to put this on? Is this what I should be doing to protect myself right now? Is this okay for the patient? Is this okay for my learning? So you really have to be very brave and very willing to reach out to people. Now, in terms of how to keep yourself healthy, I have a couple of pointers for that. Make sure you eat. Make sure you eat whenever you possibly can, and not junk food. Start your day off with a good bowl of cereal, or my personal favorite before I go into the OR, I always load myself up with a ton of potatoes, eggs, and sausages. I eat like two people just ate, I think, right before I go into an OR. And that's really the only way it can keep me going throughout the entire morning. Because whenever you start a case, you're actually not quite sure when it might end, right? It can be scheduled for a certain time, and it could be a short procedure that might only last 2 or 3 hours. But who knows? There could be complications. And so you have to really make sure you can last as long as you possibly can. And then when you come out, make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you hydrate yourself. Basically everything that you need to do to take care of your patients, hydrate them, feed them, make sure they're having appropriate bowel movements, making sure that they make urine. You got to do all those things yourself, too, to be really honest. So got to make sure to take care of your own bodily functions, and then go back into the OR and do it all over again. In internal medicine, you do a lot of rounding, so you do a lot of walking. So what I highly recommend is getting really good walking shoes that are very comfortable for you, right? You don't want to be wearing 5-inch heels as you're rounding on 10 different floors and climbing the stairs every single time, right? That's not pleasant. For surgery, you don't do a whole lot of walking, but you definitely do a whole lot of standing all day long. So you got to make sure you have a really good set of shoes that will make you feel comfortable. And sometimes, if you stand for a really long time, you are in danger of having some venous stasis. So you can also wear compression stockings, something like that, to kind of keep the blood flowing a little bit better. So these are all tiny tricks and things that you can basically do to make sure that you keep yourself as healthy as you possibly can and as comfortable as you possibly can, so that you can continue to do your job to take care of other people.
even to this day, a true statement for me is not that I'm smart. I don't think that my IQ is any higher than, it's true. You're giving me a face right now that people can't see. But I don't think I'm intelligent. I think that I'm hardworking. And the same amount of effort that it would take some students, 2-3 hours worth of work to really be on the same level, I'd study for 8-10 hours a day. The medical school is not a measure of intelligence, and I tell a lot of students this when it comes to step 1. It's not an intelligence exam, it's a hard work exam. You take someone who hasn't done well in their SATs or hasn't done well in the MCAT, that's okay. If you have reasonable intelligence, but you're really willing to work hard, you'll do well. What's important to know, at least in medicine, is when you're outside your realm of what you feel comfortable with. When I was in gen surgery or ortho, they would sometimes give you more free reign than you probably should have had. They'll leave the operating room and they'll say, "Oh yeah, you know how to do this part, right?" I'm like, it's you to step and say, "No, actually I don't. So maybe you might want to stay here and actually supervise because that's your job." Phrase it a little bit nicer than that. But that happens. And there were times where in residency, I was really out of my comfort level. So to rely on other people, for instance, there was a time where I was running a code as an intern, and I'm like, where the heck is everyone? Like, I actually need help. This is more serious than your normal code. So I turned to, she happened to be a nurse. She was a nurse in her 60s. She had obviously been there for like 40 years. She has seen everything. You learn to respect people. I didn't really like her, but I respected her. And that's probably more important than a lot of different things. And I respected her because I knew she knew what she was talking about. She had a personality issue, but she knew what she was talking about. So I turned to her and said, I need help with this. And obviously dropped the attitude because it was important. And, she helped out with different things and gave a couple suggestions of what we could do until, people who were lazy taking the elevator actually showed up. And that's important to be able to know who to turn to. You don't all have to like each other, but you have to be able to work together when the time comes.
I wish someone had actually explained to me the different roles of the different people in the OR and the different locations and what they are responsible for. There are actually 2 specific nurses who have very particular roles. There's one who's a circulating nurse, and there's another who's a scrub nurse. The circulating nurse's job is basically to introduce herself to the patient as the official nurse, and his or her job is basically to bring equipment into the OR. The second nurse, the scrub nurse, his or her job is mainly to hand the sterile equipment over to the attending and to know the equipment extremely well. Oftentimes what I see is new medical students, when they come into the operating room, they're too shy to actually introduce themselves to people. So no one really knows who they are, right? Like the circulating nurse and the scrub tech, they're both permanent fixtures within the OR, so they know each other and they know everyone else. But then the medical student, no one knows who you are, so what you have to do is speak up. You have to go over, introduce yourself to the circulating nurse, tell them who you are, put your name up on the board so that everyone in the room will be able to know who you are, and then introduce yourself to the scrub tech. Because oftentimes during the procedure, the scrub tech will know way more about the process, what gets suctioned, what gets cut, what gets tied. The scrub tech will often know those procedures much more than you as a medical student will. So having them on your side can be tremendously helpful. This may seem intuitive, but anesthesia has to work very closely with the surgery team in order to make sure that patient care is done well. There have been many cases where, I finished a case without even knowing who the anesthesiologist was. And that's not good because oftentimes during the middle of the case, you might need to call over to anesthesia and ask them, okay, how's the blood pressure doing? How's the patient's O2 sat? Is the procedure that I'm doing here okay? Is what I'm cutting okay for the patient? And so you should definitely make sure to introduce yourself to the anesthesiologist as well, get to know them. Because all these people, if they know you and they are on your side, they can be a tremendous help for you within the operating room itself. And I will just say, if they are not on your side, it can be very, very painful indeed.
There are good doctors and there are bad doctors. There are good nurses and there are bad nurses. Some nurses don't want to take any responsibility. They're not using their own clinical judgment. There are nurses, though, who absolutely will use their own clinical knowledge. You know what? This I can handle. I don't need to call the physician for this. I know what's going to happen. And they're willing to accept the responsibility. Some do that and they shouldn't have, and some do it because they really know what's going on. And you learn early on the good nurses, the ones who really not just care about their patients, 'cause I think a lot of nurses do care, but actually have they have a lot of medical knowledge and they know what's important and what's not. They know what to bother you for, what's not. And those are the types of nurses where if they paid you or they call you, you learn them. I would drop what I was doing and I would come there immediately, regardless of what else I was doing, because I knew it was important. As opposed to you get some people who just call you, just letting you know so-and-so's vitals are this. Okay, that's perfectly normal. Why are you calling me? I'm just letting you know, MD aware. And those are the people you want to strangle on a daily basis. There's interactions with all aspects of medicine. You need to learn that early on about who you can trust, who actually knows what they're talking about, and who's just there to get a paycheck and buy the time.
And in terms of like feeling a little bit alone, and definitely feeling mediocre, I can completely understand that. There is no time that I felt more mediocre than during third year of medical school. Probably less than mediocre, actually. I probably would have been lucky to feel mediocre. But the thing is, that's not just you, though. That's everyone. It's not that you are actually unskilled or unknowledgeable. It's just that you are new to a field where everyone else in that field has been working in it for a tremendously long time. So of course they would know what they're doing. That's their job. It is your job to learn what it is that they're doing. And if they make you feel uncomfortable for the fact that you're being new, that's their fault. That's not your fault. You have to keep going, keep driving ahead and making sure that you can continue to learn as much as you can. And then hopefully in the future, when you are a mentor for someone, you will take into account the fact that it was never easy to be new in the first place. So hopefully you will be a better teacher or more welcoming into the field than some people who may have made you feel uncomfortable.
Making the transition from medical school to intern year is incredibly hard, especially because your self-expectations are crazy and the expectations of other people are also just, unreasonable. And I think the best thing we can do for that, and I try to do this for all my interns, is I tell them, listen, it is hard. This is not easy. You're not expected to know this. One thing, though, is that the pressure oftentimes is not from the system, because right now, I don't expect my intern to know things. My attending doesn't, but the intern herself thinks that she should. Like, that whole I should will never, anytime I hear that, I cringe from an intern. I should be able to do this. I should know that. No, you shouldn't. And especially the way the U.S. medical system is structured, is that we work really hard, 1, 2, and 3. Year 4 is party time, for the most part. We take fairly light courses. We go for a lot of interviews, get fattened up on interview dinners, take a few vacations. We enjoy match days, and we have another vacation. And then we come to intern year, having forgotten a lot of things that we learned in third year. So how can you at that point, just because you have an MD after your name, expect to take care of extremely complicated patients at a level that you've never done before and at a quantity that you've never done before? You can't. And the funny thing about it is, you don't get it. And I was just marveling at it the other day that now that I'm a second-year resident, I've been through a year of this, I have seen these patterns, because patients fall into patterns. And I've seen these patterns a couple of times, so now I get it. Now I know what to look for, and so I can do that a lot faster, and I can do that a lot better. And it's really marvelous how the system works and how suddenly you have abilities that you never had before. But I look back at my interns who are struggling to do the same things, and I can see myself in their position, and I know that there is no way that I could have done then what I do now. And with that comes empathy. With that comes the acceptance. And I try to sort of tell them it's okay, it comes time, but then I'm always met with that dogged, oh no, I want to be able to do this now. So I think one piece of advice that I wish I could go back and give this to myself is stop comparing yourself to your residents. You will get there. You don't need to go to hell and back to become a good doctor. You just need time and you just need experience, and it's okay to struggle.
We're all human at the end of the day. Whether you got the highest score possible on your USMLE or barely squeaked by with a pass. Remember that failure is just as much a part of the learning process as coursework and experience. And as you're finding your footing in what's often an incredibly competitive environment, remember that asking for help when you need it is one of the bravest and healthiest things you can do for yourself, your team, and your patients. It not only protects you and those around you, but it sets you up to excel and be a better doctor in the long run. So here's to having a healthy sense of humor, making mistakes, and staying human through it all. If you haven't done so already, check out our podcast, My First Cadaver. It's on iTunes and myfirstcadaver.com. Stay tuned for more exclusive installments coming your way soon. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please email us at info@myfirstcadaver.com.